Up next in this room, in this track we have, which is on the web track, Kim van Wyk is going to be talking about turning out short notice voting tools in Django for a suddenly online convention, which sounds quite sudden. I think he probably had more warning of this talk, and this talk maybe has more time than turning out those tools. But Kim's an electronic engineer and software developer. He's currently thoroughly enjoying working as SA Home Loans lead data engineer in Durban. But from my précis of the talk, the suddenness wasn't SA Home Loans. So people weren't suddenly buying houses.
That too, but not not what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Great. So going to hand over to Kim to take us away into turning out short notice voting tools in Django for a suddenly online convention.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Right. I am going to be one of those slightly annoying for the cameraman speakers who moves around a little bit, but I shall try and not move too much. How's the microphone a little too close to me? Is that about right? Everybody more? Oh, it says that. Is that a bit more? Trying to not get too far. Is that about right? Okay, perfect. Cool. Thanks. Righty. I'm not going to repeat the title. It's long enough, and Dave said it twice. I won't waste more time reading what I wrote down again. What I'm going to talk about today, and what we mean by short notice, is that, like many things in 2021, there were disruptions from COVID. The South African Lions Convention, which is normally a gathering of about 150 to 200 members of the Lions organization across Southern Africa, was all kitted to be in person until about 6 weeks before the event, or call it 2 months before the event, and suddenly it went fully online because no one was going anyway. This caused us a bit of trouble, and I am a member, which is why I'm bringing it up. A South African Lion, or a General Lions Convention, includes voting by a subset of delegates, which has got its own set of complications. Not everyone gets to vote. There's only a certain number of people who get the vote, and there's two types of vote. There's a secret ballot for electing who will be the next, what's called the district governor, effectively the person in charge, in as much as a Lions organization has someone in charge. And during the convention itself, there's a set of votes by show of hands. The people who are allowed to vote are given a set of colored cards, and when we say, should Kim be given 10,000 Rand out of the generosity of your hearts, everybody holds up a card, except they don't, because they won't. But that's the general idea. So the approved delegates get to hold up a bunch of cards. Somebody walks around the room, counts them, and says, okay, however many people voted in favor or otherwise. There are, however, and I should note the importance of the talk, there are no real financial stakes at issue in this. There's no money. Lions are a non-profit organization. No one's getting paid. We're all volunteers. There's no voting to be done as to whether somebody should be paid money personally. There's nothing to game through gaming the voting. There's no gain to be had. What I did, and I did it as the probably most IT qualified member of the Lions, which says more about the membership than it does about me, the nature of the people who have joined. I did a non-exhaustive search for something I could find to help us do the voting. The convention part's fine. Zoom, etc. Tools are available. Online convention, got that waxed. What could we get to do the voting? The cheaper the better. It's obviously one of our important items. We're a non-profit. The more money we're spending on stuff like this, the less money we're spending on people in need, which is what we're for. There are lots of ways to do this, and I say it was a non-exhaustive search. Some options require each voter to register on a website, and then you follow a series of moderately complex steps. You've got to you register and you get a registration email, and you get an OTP and you sign that in, and then you go to the website and you fill out your ballot and you say, are you sure about this? And you say yes again, and then it sends you a hash code that you have to compare and all sorts of stuff. It's super secure. If you've ever voted in the PSF board elections, it's not dissimilar. They use a tool called Helios, which is super cryptographically secure, but was way more complex than I needed. I have a lot of, or would have a lot of users who aren't particularly tech savvy. They would need IT support. The IT support available, there was one volunteer who has a full-time job who does this as a part-time volunteer job, and I am talking about me. I would be the IT support. I'm sure we've all been there for personal projects and so forth. The less IT support I have to do, well, obviously, the better. Many of the other tools, as I say, they're focused on incredibly secure voting, super secrecy, etc. I don't need that. There's no financial stake at gain here. Good enough secrecy is, well, good enough. It's what I was after. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about what I did, and I don't intend to suggest that this is the best piece of software anyone's ever written. I'm just mainly going to focus on the fact that I did this in about 2 weeks of effort, if that. And I'm still, I have a job. It was my own, volunteer time, just the part-time I've got available, so call it the weekends. And I just want to basically show how relatively easy it is to do this kind of thing. I split it into 2 parts, which is one thing to first consider. You don't actually need to solve the whole problem at once if it can be split up. I wrote a tool that lets you do secret balloting before the convention, because that's fine. We can handle it before. We know who's supposed to vote. We know who's going to be voted for. The only reason we do it in person is because that's where everyone is. Now, obviously, we're not in person, so no one's there, so we can do it before. And then I needed tooling to handle voting during the convention itself, because the stuff you do by show of hand, some of you know is coming. Some of it, somebody will raise a hand and say from the floor, I propose that we do X. Now we need to vote on that. Now, I can't prep that beforehand. We don't know that. That comes up in the course of conversation. So, an important point. Secret-ish was good enough for what I wanted. A determined sysadmin could see the data. That determined sysadmin in this case being me, because I've got the database. I could literally open the MySQL data, run the select query, see who voted for what. But that was good enough. No one else could, and that was fine. Everyone is happy to trust that I wouldn't do that. And in a situation like this, one of the kind of things I'm trying to highlight is sometimes it doesn't matter. You can spend a fortune, you can get super good security, you can do all those things if you need it. Sometimes it's good enough to say, okay, well, we trust you, Bob, or Kim, or whoever it happens to be, but you're not going to look at the data. We'll roll with a simple solution. And everyone was happy with that. What I'm going to be talking about, and there's a lot more preamble here than actually talk, to be honest. I used Django quite quickly, because Django is a quick way to get set up. It's got the admin backend that did 80% of what I needed without me doing anything. An approach to how I could be secret enough without needing actual support, i.e. from people who aren't me, and how to be flexible enough, the systems and how I wrote it and so forth. Start with the secret-ish balloting. It's lives there if you want to see the magnificence of my code. It won't take you long. Some design decisions, and this is the kind of thing I wanted to focus on, the kind of lessons it taught me as I did this, which I think are maybe worth sharing. If your developer is your sysadmin, the basic Django admin is more than enough. You don't need anything fancy. There were perhaps some complicated things in there. There were I took some shortcuts, which meant I had to know exactly what I had to do in the admin to get myself set up. But that's fine. I wrote it. I'm the sysadmin. I know what I wrote. It's perfectly reasonable, I found, to take those shortcuts as long as you expect to have to explain that to someone else later. I didn't expect to ever have to explain it to somebody else. As it turns out, when I looked at this code, I'd utterly forgotten what I did a year ago, so I did have to explain it to myself. But that's at least a little bit different. I've got a vague memory of what I did. An all-powerful admin user with a known static password is fine. I could have password reset, I could have sharded users, and I could have users who can do some permissions and not other permissions and all those things, and my security would be much better, but ultimately it's me. The only admin is me. I mean, if I wanted to get at the data, I'd go to the database. I mean, I don't have to go through the Django admin panel to do anything. So there's a shortcut there, and it's something that I fought myself against. I found myself sitting down and designing proper user management systems, because that's what my job says to me you should do, and then I realized, don't be an idiot, it's just you. So Django admin is just fine. And finally, with a closed group of users who have known expectations, so all the people that are going to use this tool, you can easily get away with 1995 era table-heavy HTML without any styling. It's not pretty, it doesn't look good, no one paid for it, no one's expecting it to work, no one's expecting it to look great. It's an absolutely bog-standard HTML with no styling. Saved me a heck of a lot of time, and no one noticed. No one cared, no one said to me, why is this ugly? No one said to me, why doesn't this work? I've got a point on my slide later where I'll point out that one of the things that actually came out of it is that it worked beautifully on a mobile phone. I didn't design it for that. It's just that it's so stupid the mobile phone couldn't screw it up. It's such simple HTML. And this is where I indicated the word secretish. Again, I could have designed a system where everybody who has to vote, and I know who they are, I know freehand what the email addresses are of the people who need to be on the system. I could issue them all a username and a password, and they could log into the system, and they could set their own password, and they could log in to vote and so forth. And now suddenly there's support from me, because people are going to need password reset, they're going to need me to tell them how the system works, all that kind of stuff. I decided it would be good enough if I just send everybody a URL that they can't guess. So in the middle of my URL, there's an 8-digit randomly generated number that Django came up with that sits in the middle of the slug. So you would go to ballot/URL/vote, or sorry, ballot/slug/ no, what do I want? Ballot/randomly generated value/vote, and no one's going to guess that. And everybody gets an email with a completely different set of IDs in it. And as long as they don't share it with each other, and frankly, for this use case, why would they? That's more than good enough. It's secretish, as in, unless you are intercepting your fellows' emails, in which case you've got bigger problems, what does it matter? I BCC'd myself into all those emails. It's another important point to note. If you're doing these small projects by yourself, that is a brilliant support tool that I hadn't thought about the virtue of the value of until I did it. Because every time somebody had a problem, everything was an email. I had those emails. Somebody phoned me, WhatsApped me, said, look, I didn't get the email. I could literally go into my email, find the one I BCC'd myself onto, and forward it to them. Support done. That was a very useful tool that I had not thought about the power of. Again, similarly, some people need to be able to see how the vote went. Again, pick an 8-digit value. No one's going to be guessing what that is. It's not super secure. A hacker could have cracked it. I couldn't care less, because frankly, even if somebody did try, they end up learning how the Lions voted. It's public knowledge next week anyhow. There's no gain to hacking it. So I could have hacked it myself as the super hacker in seconds by trying every possible 8-digit combination in a request loop. So what? It doesn't. The people I'm serving aren't going to do that. The people I'm serving don't care about how hackable it is. It's just enough to make sure that everybody feels secure enough in their vote without having to go to super lengths. Promise you this is the only piece of code, and I was going to point out for those of you who were here for James's talk earlier, this is not nearly as complicated, but I promise no maths. This is the only piece of code I've got. Django makes it really simple to do things like generate random numbers. Basically, literally as part of the save block, I just looped over all the random numbers I'd made before, because inevitably Murphy demands that of the 100 million numbers you could choose, you'll get a collision if you don't check, because such is life. And as soon as I find one I haven't used before, assign that as the URL. And that's it. That's secretish enough. And that worked just perfectly fine. Just going to give a brief demo, basically to save me putting things on screens for a moment. And the demo is enormous. Yeah. Oh, my mic. Yes, and I pull myself out a little bit. Is that still hearable? Okay, cool. Thank you. I could vaguely hear it, but I was obviously not 100% noticing. Cool. This is it. This is the Django admin. I've done nothing. I haven't screened it. I haven't styled it. I haven't made anything pretty to it. If you come as a user coming in cold, this isn't going to make a heck of a lot of sense. But I don't care. I'm the sysadmin, which is the useful thing to remember here. Worst case, I'll write myself a note somewhere that says, this is how you use it. I didn't do that, so I forgot, and I had to look in the code how you use it, but okay, fair enough. Lesson learned, write yourself a note. But the Django admin gives you everything, everything you need. One super powerful admin user who can do everything. Sorry, what was that? I'll tell you it was root, but this is really all there is to it. This is absolutely no more complex. Yeah, sure. I zoomed back out to kind of, how's that? Cool. Well, I was trying to sneak it in. Okay. And for the secretish ballots, because as I said, we could run this before the convention, I needed the ballot to open at a certain time and close at a certain time so that we had the results in time to announce. And again, I didn't do anything fancy. Django gave me everything I wanted. I didn't have to write any of this stuff. I'm going to open an election now. I'm going to close it tomorrow. And my apologies, I put the wrong question in the wrong place. That's what the ballot's called. Ballots can have more than one question. I would have been a little bit more kind of smarter than this. And finally, I'm going to add one voter to this system, who is, well, two voters, me and me again. Django being too smart for my own good. And this is the reason I'm going through a little brief demo here is just to demonstrate this is more complex than I would expect somebody else to know how to do without some help. Not complex, but I didn't make it easy to use. I just did exactly what I wanted. But if it's me, then that's fine. So I'm going to come here to, sorry, I ended up in the wrong place. I want the emailer. Here we go. This is all I wrote in Django. I wrote a little tool that goes to read my database, sees any new voters who've been put in who haven't been emailed before. Here's a list of names, and I click a button that sends them emails. It's not very efficient. It's not very async. It's not async at all. It's just sending emails in directly using the processor. So I think I wrote like 10 at a time kind of thing to protect myself from myself. But again, it's not pretty smart. It's not doing anything in any way clever. But that's all I need. And now if I come to my emails on the assumption that that worked, except now I've forgotten what I wrote. And while you're reading, oh, there we go. This is the email address you get. Again, this is probably pretty small. But the point is this. Here is a secret URL that you can use to vote at. And if I go to that secret URL, it doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because I hard-coded port 8000 and then ran it on port 8001. So now it exists. This is it. There's no styling, there's no pretty, there's no nothing. But this, when presented to my end users, is more than good enough for them to get everything done. The question is, should we make Kim the king? Of course we should. In the interest of balance, I shall answer the other one with no. I don't know why you would do that, but fair enough. As you note, 175.0.0.3.10 is not the same as the previous one was, which started with an 8. And that's more than good enough for, whoops. I don't want to Google search for crying in a bucket. I want you to go there. Yes, thank you. So go no. And that's all we need. The final thing that comes out of my Django, and I've already forgotten how I wrote it, is where do the results come from? And that's because I wrote it like this. And if we go to or not, this is the other part. Do everything with Django. Come on. So I have, thank you. It was results. Thank you, that's what I wanted. I only take 4 tries and it's fine now. But the Django admin toolkit helps you figure that out as well with the Django debug on. And literally this is everything we had. I gave my end users this stuff, the people who cared about you, the people who were auditing the vote for lack of a better word, came and looked at this summary. Everybody else clicked on their unique URL and they said yes. If they turned out they changed their mind, they could click on the unique URL again and change their mind, and we just recorded the last one, which the site did tell you. And more than good enough. I saved a fortune. I didn't buy a cryptographically secure piece of kit, and it all works. What am I doing for time there, David?
You're at 20 now.
Okay,
We did start late, so 5 more minutes until 25 minutes.
Okay, I'll probably take us to 30 and then stop at that one. The other thing that I did, the conference open voting, very similar idea. I'll demo it in a moment, but it's no more complicated than the last one was. But again, I picked a couple of design decisions that I made without thinking about them that I found interesting to reflect on afterwards. Simple coding made life a little harder for the sysadmin, me, but made life a lot easier for the developer, me. So I traded developer me against sysadmin me and decided sysadmin me could suffer a little while developer me could be quick. That's a trade-off you could make. Developer me could decide that sysadmin me has to support this thing for 10 years and developer me must suffer a bit now. That's also reasonable. I didn't expect to use this that quickly or that much. I certainly didn't expect to be talking about it a year later. So, I mean, I knew exactly how it worked when I wrote it, and I used it a week afterwards. So now actually, sysadmin me is suffering somewhat in the talk because I had to figure out how the heck it works because developer me took some shortcuts. And that I'm gonna treat that like a real lesson rather than just a mistake I made. But it's worth noting if there are trade-offs you can make. You can be, as we all know, is not kind of new or secret. You can be super planning, super careful, super everything up front, and then everything works smoothly down the line, but that takes time. What they say, you know, you can have it fast, you can have it good, or you can have it cheap. Pick 2. I picked fast and I picked cheap, so it wasn't good. It could have been good and it could have been cheap, but it wouldn't have been fast, etc. Minimal complexity for my user. This is critical. This is what I wanted. My users are, I don't want to be rude because this will be recorded, but non-technical, I think would be fair to say. They're not in my line of work. They don't live their life on a computer. They don't know how the website works, etc. So the easier thing for them, the better. And that was what I was really after. And I'll make a point about that in a moment. Well, the only other thing that I just wanted to point out here, again, it's a case of, and the reason I mention it, it's a trade-off between security and complexity versus what was good enough. Everybody who registers for the actual online convention got issued a number by the system we use. So I registered, I got issued 001, Bob registered, got issued 002, etc., etc. I knew up front which of those people were going to be the ones casting the votes. So I could simply say, you will log into my, well, you won't even log in. You will visit a website and you will say, I am 001. Thank you, please let me vote. That's obviously open to abuse. No one's logging in. There's no passwords. There's no usernames. There's no nothing. If I happen to know that you're 001, I could get in ahead of you and cast your vote. As always, there's a trade-off there. I trust my people not to do that. We're a service organization of people who want to be there. We're not trying to game the system. We're not interested. There's no gain to be had, even if we were worried about people being malicious, which we weren't. There's nothing to be gained by doing that. If you trust your people, you can cut out a heck of a lot of stuff. And the reason I mention that is that there's a knock on there and something I kind of took into my work life. It's possible that every now and then in our work systems, particularly the ones that don't matter as they're not the core business, we're worrying too much about stuff we shouldn't be worrying about, or at least I think I am. I'm making them too secure, too worried about passwords and resets and so forth, where frankly, even if I trust you entirely, you can't break anything. Why am I worrying with all the support work, which is really just a headache for me? Okay, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to demo this one. I think I'm possibly a little running out of time here, but let me just add a quick demo. It won't take me very long. I see, I already have people set up. And I have choices, and there's questions. No, there isn't a question. Okay, so what I did with this system, just the one thing to note, I wrote a system that you can type questions in as you wish. Will be consistent. And you can choose, again, from Django's admin panel. I give it a list of choices, multiple selection. This is pain to do by hand. Django did this for me without trouble at all. I didn't have to program anything. Well, it's pain to do it by hand on the web, put it that way. And if I set my current question to the only question, then our website serves the current question. So if you visit this website right now, the current question is make Kim king. If I add another question later to say, more realistically, do we approve the budget or whatever the less exciting questions might be, and I set that the current question, you go to the website and you make the vote. So all I have to tell my users is refresh that page. That's all they have to know. So if I come in here as number 2 and I say yes, then it gets recorded and they come back to this page and I come in as number 1. I'm not going with mayor because why would I? And it gets recorded. All I have to tell my users is make sure you are on the base URL, whatever I sent them, the voting.convention.org or whatever it was. I set up a base URL. No one needed support for logging in. And now there's voting results, as you can see. Apparently, I'm now the king. Goodie for me. Okay, fair enough. That's different stuff. That's from the secret balloting. I'd already set it up and forgotten I did that. This is all I need. So the people in the convention can keep an eye. This is a public knowledge page. Everyone can keep an eye on this page. So it's a public vote in the convention hall. You can count who's holding how many cards are being held up. Everyone attending the online convention could refresh this page as much as they like, see how things are going. Everybody actually voting could visit this page, type in 001, 002, 006, whatever they are, vote, and simple. And that was good enough, as I say. And it really made me think about sometimes maybe I'm overcomplicating things, but good enough is, frankly, good enough. I do have a little bit of detail about deployment, only because I mentioned at the start. I'm just going to point out I deployed it on Docker on a Linode I already had. Again, to use the stuff the Lions are already paying for a Linode, which I happen to administer. I know Docker. Things in Docker are easy enough for me to do. Again, this would be, nobody else could support this. There isn't another member of the Lions organization who knows how to use Docker. It's a fairly specialist skill that doesn't translate well to the general population, but I wasn't worried about that because it's me. If somebody else had to support it, I'd go down a different, more normal route. It does mean easy cleanup, etc. Just wipe everything out and it's all gone. But the point I made is that, again, in the interest of shortcuts, you can put a lot of time into thinking and make a massively supportable, easily maintainable system. But if you're fairly confident it's you going to be doing the supporting, just do what works for you. And finally, I think that's fun, yeah. I'm going to wrap up now, and I should be just in time there, David, with some questions. Things that I learned doing this, and some of which really surprised me. I was really aiming for simplicity. I was hoping to get no support requests at all. That was my aim. I got a couple. For the secretive balloting stuff, I got people who said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't get the email, or I've misplaced it, or whatever. That's easily fixed. Forward them the email I BCC'd myself onto. Done. I still had to assist people with the one I've just shown, where I typed in 001 or 002 or whatever it is, because, and this is where I made the mistake, when you register for the conference, you get a reference with the word MD in front of it, which doesn't matter what it stands for, but you get MD 004, MD 005, and so forth. I had programmed it so you had to enter the MD part. So you had to enter ND 005. Some people typed in just a 5 without the leading zeros. Some people typed in MD5 without the 2 zeros in the middle. Some people typed in various other mistakes, and I got various bits of support that I had to help people with. And I don't begrudge that. I'm not saying that was bad on the user's part, but it shows me that no matter how simple I thought I was making it, you're still not going to get away without the support requests, which is just something you have to factor in. It was incredibly plain or ugly. Delete is appropriate. I'm going with plain. Frankly, it was ugly. No one ever mentioned it. No one ever said to me, why is the site ugly? Why doesn't it look good? And so forth. No one cared. Doesn't matter to anyone at all as long as it practically got the job done. And as I mentioned earlier, it worked beautifully on a mobile phone. But no, I mean, I didn't design it that way. Turns out this is faster than doing it by hand. So I might actually introduce this mechanism for the actual in-person conferences, because counting cards by hand is hard work. There's 80 cards being held up out of 200 people sitting in a room. It's quite hard to make sure you've got an accurate count. Well, assuming you're voting unanimously. If 44 people out of the 80 who could hold up their cards scattered around the room, it's quite hard to count. But the final two lessons, the things I wanted to somewhat dwell on and then close off on. What this reinforced for me, and it reinforced for me more than just this project, and one of the reasons I thought this would kind of be vaguely interesting to talk about is to note that, as David and I were actually discussing yesterday, the perfect is the enemy of the good, as Voltaire said. And I've forgotten, thank you, David, for reminding me it was Voltaire who said it. There's lots of things I could have done, would have taken me a little bit longer, not much, but I could have had login systems, I could have had styling, I could have had a much nicer looking system. My users could have possibly not needed any support at all. Sysadmin me would have figured out immediately, because there were directions in the admin toolkit on what buttons to push to do what. Developer me could have taken a little bit longer. But none of that was necessary. All I needed to do was get this thing up and running as fast as possible. I didn't worry about perfect, I worried about good. And good was more than good enough. And I find myself, having done this, I actually sat back down at my desk the next week, looked at some of the systems I was designing at the time and thought, actually, this is overkill. I don't actually need this stuff. You ain't going to need it. All those old-fashioned aphorisms that come up, those things are true, and I forget them from time to time, and maybe the rest of us do as well, so it's worth being reminded. You don't have to be perfect every time. I mean, obviously, some of us are perfect anyhow, but I most certainly am not, so it's reasonable to write. Just aim for good. And finally, the last point I wanted to make. I could do this to benefit the Lions organization because I happen to be a software developer. If there wasn't a software developer in the organization, and the need arose that they needed to do this kind of voting without access to a software developer, this would cost you. You'd have to go to a software house somewhere and pay them, or maybe if you're a convincing enough nonprofit, you can convince someone to kind of give it to you as a donation, give you the work as a donation. Or you'd have to buy a complex product or enter again into negotiations for a heavy discount and so forth. And I'm arrogant enough to think I'm a competent software developer. I'm certainly not the best developer in the world. I'm in no way a Django developer, as you can see from the magnificence that I presented. I'm actually a low-level data engineering type. My programs run in CLIs. My users get a CLI if they're lucky. There's no chance of a GUI. Certainly no chance of a web. So I'm not a web developer per se. But my skills, such as they are, were enough to meet the need. And the kind of point I'd like to leave you with is that there are lots of organizations out there who do not have access to a tame software developer. Lots of non-profits, lots of people who every cent they make goes into doing something useful, and the less of that money they have to give to people in need, and the more they have to spend on stuff like this, the less good they're able to do. So maybe have a look around. Maybe you know people in organizations, or you might volunteer your time. You would be astonished as a software developer for what you think of as easy
is costing those organizations 20 hours a week of wrangling spreadsheets or counting things by hand that the computer could do in seconds. Or, I mean, just somewhat more drastic thing, writing a piece of bespoke software that helps them do their job. Hundreds of examples out there. Your skills are rarer than you might think. What is easy to you is impossible for other organizations. So maybe just, I'm going to leave yourselves and hopefully anybody watching online with the thought that if you do know of any organizations that look like they could use this IT help, or even if you don't know if they need IT help, ask them. And you may well find that there are differences you can make, small, easy ones for you, that make a massive difference to the organization. And there, I think we shall leave it, because we have just hit the end of time. Cool.
That was great, Ken. And nice call to action at the end. Anybody putting their hands up, I won't guess it's for the call to action, but if it is, and you want to do that, also you can ask him about that. Do we have questions at all from the floor? Yeah. Please introduce yourself and then the question.
Hi, my name is Isaac Setlango. Work for Sereo as a software developer. So I just want to ask you, you said you're trying to make this as simple as possible. So why didn't you just use Google Forms? Because I think that could have taken you like less than an hour to do it, and put like a regular expression with the code that you're sending to those individuals, and just send them that link and refresh every time they why did you have to maybe spend 2 weeks on that, but you just wanted something
I'd love
simple?
to have a deep, well thought out answer for why I didn't do that. The major reason is frankly because it didn't occur to me. But to be brutally honest, but for where it did occur to me, the secretive stuff, I somewhat worried I wouldn't get. Not that it wouldn't be secure enough, but I worried that people would think it wasn't secure enough. Was my concern. I know that there is some. There's some emphasis attached on the fact that it's supposed to be a secret ballot, so I wanted to at least present something that felt secret. And I worried slightly that a form that wasn't served from our own URL would maybe seem slightly less secret. Why I didn't do it for the in-person conference got me. Frankly, that would have been a brilliant idea. Forget everything I just said. Do that.
The best code is code you didn't write, right?
Well, exactly, yeah.
Anybody else got something? Kim? Now, otherwise you can grab him a coffee afterwards. Another round of applause for Kim. Thank you very much.
Good,
Well
thank
done.
you. Cool, thanks.